Well, Blaine, thank you so much for joining me here today, and excited to talk about your rugby career and your accomplishments on the pitch. But before we get to that, I want to take you way back to where it started. And I know that you were also an accomplished water polo player, I believe, in high school. And so just want to kind of hear about the start of your water polo career. And did any of that, those skills translate at all to the rugby pitch when you were growing up?
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on. Yeah, I suppose starting at the beginning, I was just like kind of every other American kid growing up playing and competing in just about everything. And I always loved sports and I always loved being a part of, teams and, participating and taking part in tons of different teams and different sports. And I always had a really difficult time choosing when we kind of finally got to the age where if you wanted to be serious about particular sports, then it was time to make some decisions. And I always really struggled with that. And I think fairly early on, my mom did a pretty good job of steering me away from football. My dad and brother played in college, and I ended up in high school joining the water polo team, basketball, and then I swam as well. And I ended up being pretty good at water polo, and had some opportunities there to pursue it. And I think, at the end of the day, that was my original ambition, was to play water polo in college, and I ended up deciding that wasn't the right path for me. And then, although I went to a rugby playing high school at Jesuit and had a perennial program, won national championships, I think my junior and senior year, and I had a lot of friends on the team, and I would drive by the field every day, not knowing that's where my life was going to end up. And so as I kind of entered college as a freshman and ended up as really an athlete without a sport, having decided not to pursue water polo, my friend kind of said, "Hey, you need to play this game." And I knew it was what I was supposed to do. And the reason why it was like all the things I loved about all the different sports that I played, and all the different challenges and even the personalities of teammates, all kind of wrapped up into one thing. And, that just kind of connected with me and, kind of, I guess, ignited that internal, passion that this was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, very cool. And I think that you ended up first at UCLA before you ended up graduating from Cal. But talk about kind of the challenge of starting a new sport at a relatively older age. I mean, 18, 19 years old is a little older than we typically start our sports. So just kind of talk about your development and kind of how those first couple of years went as you were learning the sport that would eventually you would have a professional career in.
Yeah, no, although I was, kind of late to rugby, and again, my sort of deficiencies from a technical and tactical perspective was probably the thing that, was most hurt by not, playing the game growing up. But that said, I think, having that sort of multi-sport background was really, I think, a pretty advantageous thing when it came to my overall athletic development and being fit for rugby. And so that's why I'm always and will always be a major proponent of multi-sport athletes and playing and exposing yourself as much as possible growing up. So again, what I tried to do was immerse myself in the sport, and that was, technically and tactically learning as much as I could, extra skill development stuff. But a lot of it was actually more mental, and it was learning and seeing the game that I maybe didn't see as much growing up. And I was watching a lot of games and, trying to see as many pictures as I could as an athlete, develop at least some more embedded intuition around what the game was, what the game looked like, how it was supposed to look like. And then as I kind of gained more and more experience, I was able to package, what I was doing from, say, like an individual training perspective on my individual skills, and also what I was doing, say, like in my quote unquote classroom type work around watching the game, studying specific players, and then kind of distill that down into, getting more efficient and effective and becoming a better rugby player overall. So, it was trying to accelerate my learning curve, to that of, a New Zealand kid who grows up with a rugby ball and a pair of boots in their hand, versus me, who was really kind of an 18-year-old American kid who picked up the game quite late. But that being said, that created some challenges, but I also think it created a few opportunities for me as well, given my background, and then ultimately it came down to my effort and application to really try to be great at it.
Yeah. Well, I agree with what you said about the multi-sport athletes. And I think, specifically in football, I've seen this in my career where a majority of the really good players that I've had the opportunity to work with are always ones that excel in other sports and have other talents that are able to put to use in other sports. You talked about kind of like doing your own studying. And I'm just curious, was this something where your coaches were like bringing film to you? Were you seeking this out on your own on YouTube or just on the internet? Kind of just share a little bit about how you were doing your own teaching of yourself about this sport.
Yeah, well, I think it was a little bit of a combination. I mean, not really, like I wasn't getting, prescripted, this is film you should watch, this is player one, although that happens later, in life a little bit. It really was just kind of being really curious about the game and certain players, and then finding all the games I could on YouTube, and thankfully for YouTube I was able to probably watch more tape than a lot of generations previously. And then as that kind of came about, that just became habitual as well, where I wanted to watch players. I wanted to see what they're doing. I'd seen them previously doing this. I wanted to see what they were going to be doing in the future. And then that sort of became, a way that, really throughout my career, how I continued to grow and stay sort of as that student. Because what I would typically do during my professional career is I'd watch my own tape during the games, watch our team performances. Then I'd have a collection of 10 other rugby players, usually in my position, that I would watch their games in their moments every week. And I was able to kind of usually do that in tandem with an analyst who would help put them together and say, hey, here's all the clips of these players over the last weekend. And then really kind of benchmark what I was doing versus them, and also hopefully take a few things and allow me to continue to focus on what I could be really good at. And then also, hey, what are these other players doing in some areas that I might want to be better at as well?
Yeah, I like that process. And I know after UCLA that you ended up at Cal, and Cal has one of the best rugby programs in college athletics. And I've heard you mention before too about how that was really kind of the foundation for the player that you were going to become in your professional career. So just talk a little bit about that transition into the Cal program, and what did that really mean when you said it built the foundation for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, probably one of the toughest, but ultimately the best decision I ever made was to, return to Cal. And I transferred probably for all the reasons that, any other kid would transfer closer to home, but also, there was an opportunity to go to one of the best public universities in the world. And then also from a rugby perspective, really treat the game as a true study, which, fortunately for all of us who've gone through that program, is an incredible experience. Obviously technically and tactically with what you learn from the game perspective, athletically as far as your development, but also your character development and learning what it's like to be on a high performance team and what's required of those who want to be a contributing member of those teams, and also from my standpoint too, what it takes in order to be a leader of sport. And so from that perspective, I really got this holistic education, like I said, foundation for what would really be the trajectory of my life after Cal. And I was as a result of that experience probably more prepared than most other professionals when I finally got that opportunity to go to the UK, just because I knew what it was like to, thankfully from my coaches and mentors at Cal, what it was like to be the very top end of performance expectation, and what it actually meant for what your daily routines looked like. Because there's not many accidents in professional sports. You get lucky on occasion, but anyone can have a good performance one day. But if you really want to truly be excellent over the long haul and the duration of your career, it's built fundamentally on your habits day in and day out, your commitment to the excellence and values, and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, we see this all the time, regardless of whether we're talking about sport or even people that have success outside of sport. It's that daily routine, it's that consistency that you were just talking about. In terms of like the leadership in your leadership education there, was it something as simple as really just the daily fundamentals and seeing that done by the older players on the team or by the coaches? Or was there anything that they were doing explicitly to teach this leadership to you guys?
It was both those things. Fortunately for us, it's we have some very robust institutional IP, having existed for as long as we've existed. But our coaches there, led by Coach Clark and Coach Billups, have been able to build a comprehensive program that relies on some core values and really driven by core behaviors of what's expected of the team from a attitudinal standpoint, from, I would say, a behavioral standpoint, and from an actual performance standpoint as well, around being professional, being prepared, again, what's required of being a good teammate, and then putting some definitions and nomenclature to that, so we actually knew collectively what stuff meant, and that's, I think, pretty unique actually. A lot of people talk about the same things, but they actually don't mean the same thing to even the people on the same team. So, having that sort of shared language around, we knew what we were saying when we talked to each other. And therefore we knew what the expectations were, especially for the coaches. They could expect certain things for us, and then that gets distributed down and owned by, the older players on the team and who have more experience. And then that responsibility gets passed down throughout the rest of the squad. It creates a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts, where the expectation is that you live by our cultural standards, and therefore that's what drives performance in the end. And we've had some success, but the coaches at Cal will be the first to tell you that that's not what they're there for, and that's not why we're here. That to me was really kind of the start around this idea that it isn't about just chasing shiny stuff. It is about who you are, how you go about your business, and then how you contribute day in and day out to the overall growth of the team.
One of the things I've seen in my experience is the best teams are the teams that are process driven. They're not results oriented. Was it kind of the same for you guys at Cal? Like, did you ever talk about winning, or did you ever talk about winning championships? Or was it literally, like you just said, that focus on those daily behaviors?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key concepts that we get drilled into us is this idea of constant performance improvement. And we'll literally chart that as a graph, both individually and collectively, around where we're at and what we're doing, and therefore that's not defined by whether or not the outcome is a win or a loss. It's driven by what our own expectations are around collectively over the course of an 80-minute contest, and then breaking down into components around specific phases or parts of the game that we need to improve, whether it's set piece, which in rugby is a scrum or a line out, or is it the kicking game, or is it the way we handle the ball and our general skill set, and fitness, and all those different components kind of coming together around analyzing our holistic performance. Is really kind of the way we benchmark it, and it has nothing to do with the scoreboard, and everything to do with our own expectations around what we feel is excellent. And then ultimately that's all got to be backed up by by effort. And that was always kind of the maximum effort's kind of the bare minimum acceptable standard, right? So, it was, again, as a foundational experience. I mean, a young athlete couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I love the defining aspect that you talked about as well, because I think this is a part that gets overlooked. I can remember early in my career, coaches talking about we need to develop a road mentality. But what does that mean? Like it's very easy in coaching, I think, sometimes to say we're going to do things the right way, but actually describing to your team what the right things are to be focusing on and what the right way actually means. Sometimes that gets lost a little bit, and we can use these generic terms that, like you said, mean different things to different people, even if they have lockers right next to each other. And then I know after this, you ended up, like you mentioned earlier, in the UK for your pro career. And, explain, because obviously I'm not 100% familiar with professional rugby. Is this something where you get drafted into the pros, or is it more of a longer process of going from an American college team to the pros in the UK? Just give us a little bit of insight as to your transition into the pro game.
Yeah. So, it's a tricky one for sure, but I was fortunate enough to start playing for the U.S. team while I was in college, and then I got selected for the Rugby World Cup in 2011 after I graduated from Cal. And then, my overall objective as a rugby player was to go overseas. I wanted to see how good I could get at the sport, and I wanted to be at a place where I could be challenged week in and week out against the best players in the world, and then ultimately be the best version of myself when I came and competed for the U.S. team. So that was kind of my overall, thought process around that, and because I thought that this would be the best place for me to be, to grow and to develop. And so after the World Cup, I came back and did the Pan American Games with the Sevens team, because that was when we first came back into the sort of Olympic movement. And then I actually ruptured my Achilles after the Pan American Games a few months afterwards. And so I had a year basically of rehab. And this was when the USOC and USA Rugby first started their sort of residential full-time program down in Chula Vista in San Diego. And so I'd rehabbed at Cal. Thankfully my coaches continued to support me and invest in me and allowed me to rehab and prepare at the facility at Berkeley. And once I was kind of good to go, I went back to Chula Vista for a couple of months, went on the summer tour with the 15s team again, and then received a call from an agent that there was a trial opportunity with Leicester Tigers in the Premiership, which is sort of like the Premier League equivalent. And at the time, they would have been sort of like Manchester United. They had just won the Premiership. They'd been in the last 10 finals or something crazy. And initially the trial was going to be for 2 weeks. And then if that went well, it could turn into 4 weeks. And then, all things being hopefully going well, I had an opportunity to earn a contract. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. And so got on the plane and kind of just went in with the attitude that I was going to, enjoy the experience as much as I could. And then I was just going to compete my tail off. And that's what I did. And fortunately, it ended up with me getting a professional contract, and 2 weeks turned into a couple of years. And then after that, I changed leagues and teams to Cardiff in Wales, in a different league as well. It was the Pro 12 then. It was then the Pro 14, and now it's the United Rugby Championship, and which is a super interesting league, a little bit more European and now international, with a few South African teams included in that competition. So it was definitely a bit of a whirlwind, but just an incredible experience, an incredible opportunity to be on the field week in and week out with some of the best players in the world from all over the world.
Yeah, it's got to be a great experience, and sounds like a dream come true. Like you said, you wanted to play overseas and got the chance to fulfill that and live that out. talk about, Leicester and Cardiff. I'm even familiar with these teams, believe it or not. And so I know that these are two of the better teams. Was there one team in particular where you guys either weren't kind of thought before the season to be anything, but made a run? Or was there one team in particular that stood out to you that you're really proud to have been a part of? And what was it about that team that stood out to you?
Yeah, no, they were incredible experiences at both clubs. And, I think, Leicester was an amazing experience as on the front of my career, having had the historical success that they had, kind of the stake that they had in the town and what they meant to the town. And so for me, it was an unbelievable place. I have such fond memories of that team. And it was a tough place to leave for sure. And then, Cardiff, I knew, that it was, again, historically an unbelievable rugby town with incredible rugby history, but it was a team that was sort of in rebuild mode. And so I kind of went there knowing that I was going to be a part of that and wanted to be a part of that. And that was part of what attracted me to that challenge. And my third season there, we ended up, winning the European Challenge Cup, and kind of went on this run on the end of the season, which is, again, one of the reasons why I just love sports, is just for whatever reason, after, years of toiling together, something just kind of magical happens. And again, that was kind of that for us. And we ended up going on this run and then winning in Bilbao, Spain, the European Challenge Cup. And it was definitely a highlight. And again, I'm always one to sort of not try to cliche my career too much with saying, oh, it's when we won this and we won that, because they're more representative than sort of, trophy achievements. And because you kind of know what goes into that journey and the realization of some sort of shared outcome. And so I was super proud to be a part of that team. And it was a pretty special one.
Yeah, I've been a part of a few teams like that, and it's never just that one season. It's always kind of the 2 or 3 seasons preceding the season where you have that success, where it's almost like you go through that crucible experience with your fellow players, and it almost bonds you together even stronger than if you guys would have had a strong culture in place.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think every team has an experience curve, right? There's sort of the development of the team. Each team is slightly different. And, how does the core end up working together, the relationships that kind of span across that core, how do they matriculate up in the relationship with the coaching staff, and learning out what you're good at, right? And matching that with the game plan and what you're able to execute. And so I think all that stuff does take time, which is why, I in my experience anyways, it always was around 3 years to build the best team with whatever the group it was. And I'm not saying that's a magical number. That was just kind of what always stuck out for me, is like year 3, we started to kind of all figure it out.
Yeah, I've seen very similar things. I was talking with somebody the other day, like, how long does it actually take to build a culture? And we kind of settled on a very rough, wide range of like 18 to 36 months. So
yeah,
definitely have seen similar things in my experience. And also in 2016, you co-founded the US Rugby Players Association. So kind of just share with us a little bit about that. Number one, what did that mean? And then number two, kind of like what caused you to want to co-found something like this? Was it something that you saw, or was it a combination of some conversations that you were having?
Yeah, so I mean, as an interesting background, rugby as a professional sport, although it's a very old sport in general, it's fairly young professionally, and part of that was, driven to the commitment to amateurism globally. But so in '96, the game went fully professional internationally, so globally, and as a result, there's still some development that's in the sort of professional area that's taking place. And the US is now recently started a professional league. I think we're in our second iteration. We're in the 4th season of our second iteration here. But with this sort of increase, at least from the US perspective, this increase, high performance structure, the sevens teams have been full time now with the Olympic movement, and the 15s were continuing to play in a more robust calendar. It was more out of this idea that the players should be participating and continue to participate in the growing the business of the sport here in the US. And I fortunately had a lot of good relationships with international players associations. I've been a part of them when I was in the professional leagues overseas, and sort of saw this as a natural extension. And really the objective wasn't to view this as some sort of adversarial type of dynamic, which sometimes arises in anytime there's a players association formed. And there's always a few things that you want to change, which are impetus and drivers for that. But overall, it was more to be, how can we kind of be involved and participate and make an impact. And so that was kind of really the driver behind it. And so, the right thing for us was to have hopefully all 4 teams sign up, and we were able to do that, both men and women, which was pretty incredible. And then really continue to educate and collectively grow the game here in the US, and putting together the systems and structures off the field that would allow us to be better on the field. And overall, hopefully improving the quality experience for everyone. So that was kind of the main driver behind that, and the impetus behind that.
Right. And you talked earlier about kind of like developing the leadership skills. Obviously, this is a huge indication of that. And I know you were also really involved in the leadership of the US national team as well. And so you talked about starting kind of like right after your college career. Talk about your evolution as a leader from maybe like 2011 when you first came onto the national team to eventually becoming a vice captain and a captain of the team.
Yeah, so this is such an interesting one, because in so many ways, like when you're a kid and you're a young person on the team, all you have to worry about is your job, right? You just have to go out there and perform, do what you're coached to do what you're told to do. Make sure you know your role, what's required of you, and just go execute it. But gradually, as you hopefully continue to perform and you are selected and stay a part of the team, what's required of you and the responsibility that you have to the team continues to expand as well. And that's not for everybody. Some people need to stay in that sort of just worry about me and my performance. But again, I think with team sports in particular, there is that requirement that you do contribute to the center. And so, like, for me, it was just part of that natural extension around helping the collective be as good as it could possibly be. And as a person who is gaining more and more experience, because teams do tend to change pretty quickly, as you can appreciate. Yes. So those people who are still with the team become responsible for it. And all those type of cliches around this is teaching people how we do business around here. It's defining the culture and making sure that things are the way they're supposed to be in order to drive what you expect to achieve, which is hopefully solid process and solid outcomes as a result of those process. So again, that was sort of the evolution of that. It was quite, I guess, part of that sort of natural, maturation of myself as an athlete on the team. And, having played and having been in a pro overseas, it was my turn to be responsible for the team. And that being said, that doesn't mean that you don't have to perform anymore. I think first and foremost, my responsibility as a captain was to make sure I made my own tackles, because nobody wants to listen to the captain who isn't doing their job. And so I learned that fairly early on. And like anyone, you kind of, you're learning on the fly. You expose yourself to as much growth opportunities and mentors as possible, and people are willing to help you out but you eventually have to kind of find your own voice and find your own style. And so I eventually kind of settled on making sure I made my own tackles first, the recognition that I was a teammate first, try to do as much as I could to distribute that leadership and give shared ownership to other folks who had, and and again, like from a rugby perspective, we need 15 leaders on the rugby field because we don't have the interactions on a continual basis that other sports often have with their coaches. My only opportunities to download with coaches were usually before the game. I'd get some intermittent messages during the game, talk to them halftime, and then talk to them after the game. So unless we're problem solving and fixing stuff on the field in real time, we're going to be in trouble. And so therefore, to do that, you need to have a lot of people who are participating in that process. And if they're just relying on one person to make decisions, that's not a good way to be. We need a system and a structure that, again, the information is fed up and the key decision makers can make decisions. But at the end of the day, people need to be empowered to be leading in their own right. And so that was, kind of how, I ended up, kind of thinking about my job was, how do I, champion the culture based on doing my job? How do I, be a good and effective teammate, making sure we're empowering the people on the field to be leaders in their own right, and then contribute back into the middle. And then that was from a performance. And obviously, like, we have all the off the field stuff from, the way we interact with each other, the way we represent our team and our country or whatever it is. That's all part of, the program. But those are all, again, experiences that you learn over time, and it's the ability as a young athlete to be here, and then as you grow and mature, they pick your head up, and then you have to expand your field of vision is definitely one that takes time. So a bit of that journey.
I love how you talked about the evolution, right? I think sometimes when we're talking about leadership, we think of charisma, or we think of like getting in front of the team and like telling people what to do. Sometimes it can be literally as simple as the way that you approach your job and letting everybody see the way that you approach your job. And I know that even like as recently as this last year with Tampa Bay and Tom Brady going to play with them, a lot of the players on the team talked about, well, we didn't realize how much time and effort goes into pre-practice and post-practice for him, not only staying after or showing up early to like get practice going or continue practice after it ends, but like taking care of the body and just like the care that it takes to get your body ready to play, get yourself mentally ready to play. And it doesn't always have to be this rah, like we see on, Friday Night Lights, the TV show. So I love that you talked about your evolution and kind of staying within yourself and letting yourself grow as a leader as you were going through that experience.
I think every young sort of leader makes that mistake, right? It's like, oh, I'm supposed to be the captain, so I have to go in and talk louder and talk more. And you eventually learn that there's only so much oxygen in the huddle, and you do have I think a finite amount of times that you can use your voice with the impact you want to use it for. So learning how to save it and be strategic with it. And again, that's really, a lot of those are opportunities for other people to have voice, and then they can become leaders in their own right, which then makes your job a lot easier because everyone isn't so reliant on one person for direction, which, again, like the idea where everyone's, a contributing member with responsibilities, those are the most fun to be on, teams to be on, because everyone feels much more bought in and owns a bigger piece of this thing that we call a team.
Totally. The empowerment of your teammates is huge when we're talking about creating just that kind of the shared values and that shared culture. And speaking of culture, you were fortunate to be part of 4 really great organizations. And I just want to know, like, when you reflect back on your career, are there any commonalities that you see either in maybe a few of those organizations or maybe in all 4 of those organizations?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question. I never really thought about it that way. I think, from my standpoint, again, like everything is, I thought of everything as a journey, and it is, my personal journey, which was, kind of literally all over the map. And that starts in Sacramento, California, and what I was sort of given as a kid from my parents and especially my mom, and then my growth and development through high school, and then Cal, and the foundation I was given there from what it means to be a pro, what it means to be a teammate, and how treating sport as study is supposed to look. And then when I kind of made the U.S. team, understood what it means for the first time to represent your country, and kind of the expectation and the responsibility you have there, and then going overseas, the pressure and responsibility of representing a professional club and in front of a committed fan and engaged fan base, but also representing more than just me as an individual, but American rugby players in general, and then again transferring to Cardiff, which is taking what my reputation, what I earned as a player on the field, both as a pro and international, and then applying it and then matching that standard that I previously set, and then again having to do that as a captain at a Rugby World Cup. So I mean, I see them more just as steps on this journey where I continue to build on what came before. And so that's sort of, I guess, what I really pull from the experience is kind of what they taught me individually as a step along my journey around where I was in that minute, where I came from, and then ultimately where I was headed.
Yeah. And you said something earlier when we were talking, you mentioned just kind of, in my words, I was interpreting it as ongoing skill and technique development. You're never done getting better. You're never done learning, and you're always trying to grow. In the score, it doesn't matter if you win big or if you pull out a close win or you lose. Like, you're always going to go back to your process and that continual drive to get better. And as we kind of wrap up, I would just want to ask, like, this is a tough question, but is there like one thing in particular that you're very proud of through your rugby career? Or is there a moment or something that stands out where you kind of look back and you're like, wow, I can't believe I got the opportunity to do that. I dreamed of that and I actually got to live that out. Is there anything that sticks out to you that you're most proud of, or kind of like, I can't believe I got to do that moment?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard one, but maybe it was because of where I was in my career at that point. But the Rugby World Cup in Japan, it was brutal for me personally, because I was responsible. I was the captain of the team, but we ended up going 0-4, right? And and we had some ideas and some expectation around what we wanted to do, and again, like that for me. And we put ourselves in a potential, had some potential opportunities to do some good stuff. We were in a tough and challenging pool, but nobody cares. Like that's life in elite sport. And so I got injured the last game, and I pulled my calf and then my hamstring, and I wasn't for sure that I was going to retire after the Rugby World Cup, although I kind of knew it. And as I was kind of walking around the field at the end of the game, I kind of saw my wife, and she knew everything that I'd poured into that, that specific part of the journey, having captained the team the last, 4 years, and doing it at a Rugby World Cup, and then coming up short. But that's also sort of, the brutal and beautiful nature of sport, where it is this sort of ruthless forum of competition. And but it's so fleeting, right? And so even though like I was gutted by having not won and advanced and gone to the quarterfinal, which was hope, being able to sort of at the same time recognize the uniqueness of the experience was is a hard emotion to sort of like truly articulate. But seeing my wife in that moment kind of just reminded me of just what a cool journey it had been to date, and how grateful I should be. But at the same time, never quite satisfied with with the result. But again, that's sport. And that's the only way you stay true to the value of it, and is your continued commitment to being as good as you can be, and continue to chase improvement and all that stuff. So yeah, that was kind of ultimately, I think, like one thing that I kind of take away.
Yeah, I mean, sport is the ultimate in human condition, right? Like we're dealing with everything that we deal with in life. And what a beautiful image that you just said, where you're walking off the field and, you're not raising the trophy, but yet you see your wife in the stands, and almost in a way brought back to like what's truly important in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for sharing. What a beautiful memory. And I guess just in kind of wrapping up, you've had this great career in rugby, and I know that you've done some work as an analyst, and you have this great knowledge base. So is coaching in your future? Are you looking for kind of to take your skills that you learned from rugby outside of the game? Basically, are we going to see you on the sidelines of the pitch here pretty soon, or kind of like what are you feeling about the next chapter in terms of rugby?
Maybe. So I'm going back to school. So I'm doing my executive MBA, and then I'm likely going to take I am going to take a consulting job as well. So off the field, because I kind of really do want some, outside of just the sport experience, and I feel like it's good exposure. And again, learning around developing a diverse package that I can then hopefully apply to some way. But I will 100% always be part of the game. I've recently become a board of governors for USA Rugby Foundation, and I'll be continuing to grow and develop and contribute in a number of different ways. Hopefully start coaching here pretty soon once we're able to have a more regular schedule. And my baby daughter allows me to get out of the house. She might be making tackles pretty soon, although I prefer she's playing golf club. But yeah, but it'll always be a part of me, and it is a part of me. So maybe someday.
Got it. So Coach Scully potentially coming to a sideline near us.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, Blaine, thank you so much for sharing about your journey and just sharing about your lessons in your career with us today. And really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, anytime, man. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.